10% of people who choose not to comply with coronavirus restrictions are older, mostly male, and are more extroverted, according to new University of Sydney study. More than 1,500 people were surveyed as part of the research in Australia, in the UK, the US and Canada. Research assistant Dana Fullerton worked on the study and joins me now. Dana, welcome.
Hi, PK. Thank you for having me.
Who does the science say is most likely to be non-compliant?
Yes, so we found in this group of 10% of our sample that in terms of personality, they were scoring lower on a measure of agreeableness, which means that they tend to be less cooperative and less considerate towards others. We also found that they were lower on intellect, which means that they tend to be less open to new ideas and experiences and less flexible. So what that means for compliance is that they might be less readily able to adapt quickly as the situation keeps changing and as we need to keep adjusting our behaviours and adapting our lifestyles. As you said, we also found that they were more extroverted. And on top of that, we looked at amorality and reactance. So these people were scoring quite highly on amorality, which means that they tend to have less regard for others and obligations and responsibilities. So they're quite self-interested. And psychological reactance means that they tend to have this unpleasant reaction to any rules or regulations that threaten their freedoms, and they're quite motivated to regain those freedoms.
Contrary to popular assumptions, your research found young people don't make up the majority of the group, even though, I think young people have been blamed for sort of wild parties during the pandemic. So what age group does?
Yes, so this non-compliant group on average were about 29 years old. And within the 90% compliant group, we found three smaller clusters. And one of those smaller clusters was on average age 25. So that was our youngest group in the sample. So yeah, we did find that this non-compliant group was not necessarily just made up of all the young people, which is interesting finding.
And why were males more likely to be non-compliant?
It's an interesting question. We didn't look particularly into what's making males less compliant, but we did find that of the entire sample, 14% of males were non-compliant compared to only 8% of females. So there was a significant difference there.
Was socioeconomic status a factor?
It's not something we looked at in this study in particular.
Okay. So what's suggested to combat this?
Another thing that we looked at that we can definitely use to inform our approach going forward was that people are getting their information quite differently between these compliant and non-compliant groups. So the non-compliant group were less likely to be using official sources, and they're also less likely to check the legitimacy of their sources. So I think we need to look at using a wider range of sources to disseminate messages, and that might include more casual and informal sources. And we also need to be looking at framing the messages so that it appeals to this group in particular, because the message that, we're all in this together and we need to protect others is not particularly motivating for this group who are scoring high on amorality and reactance because they tend to be more self-interested. So we need to be spreading the message in a way that appeals to their self-interest. And why is it in their interest to comply?
So we know that there are more protests across the country planned over the weekend. What's next for your research?
What's next is, it's definitely on our radar to potentially look at the issue of compliance with vaccinations. At the moment, our continuing research is planned on the specific role of resilience and the role that resilience plays in both compliance and mental health and well-being. We've uncovered some very interesting results about its specific role, and this is still in preparation, hasn't been published quite yet. So ask me in a month's time and we'll have some more interesting things to say about that.
We will. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, PK. Great to talk to you.
Research assistant Dana Fullerton there from the University of Sydney.